I, a 20-year-old male, recently saw my dad and his wife, the woman who contributed to my parents' divorce, for the first time in years during a family gathering. This all ties back to an incident from 8 years ago when I was 12. I knew my dad had been unfaithful to my mom, and their divorce was underway. I was staying at my dad's place, where he was already living with his affair partner. They left me alone with their phones, so I accessed their work contacts and sent messages to their bosses about the affair, including some harsh words about them both. My dad's wife discovered it first and lost her temper. She yelled, demanding to know what I'd done, and called me a foolish kid. I just smirked at her, and when my dad found out, he was calmer but asked why I'd done it. I told him something like, "You always said actions have consequences." It caused a huge stir for over a year. I refused to say sorry, and because I kept boasting that I'd tell anyone about it, they stopped letting me visit. I saw my dad a few times after that, but it had been at least 4 years since I last saw him before this recent gathering. The issue came up during dinner. My dad's wife brought it up, saying I'd tarnished their reputations and that they'd never recovered, so I owed them a big apology. She said my actions could have ruined their lives and asked what I expected them to do. I told her she wouldn't like my answer because I don't think highly of them. I refused to apologize, and she tried to argue, but I ignored her. My grandparents told her to calm down, but she sulked, making the evening about her and my dad. She demanded an apology again later, and my grandparents asked her and my dad to leave. They later said they wished they hadn't invited them. Most of my aunts and uncles thought it was amusing, and one uncle even shared that my dad and his wife had cheated on each other multiple times, which made me grin. Apparently, they're touchy about it, which is why she backed off when I said she wouldn't want my honest opinion. But one aunt said I should have apologized to keep the peace, given the setting. She felt what I did was excessive and that I shouldn't have meddled like that. I don't regret it, and I'm not sorry, so I don't think an apology is needed. But out of curiosity, am I wrong for refusing to apologize for messaging my dad and his affair partner's bosses about their affair? She's saying I owe them an apology for letting people judge them based on the truth of their actions. Does she even hear how ridiculous that sounds? I didn't spread lies like kids sometimes do. Response: you're not wrong. How dare you let people see me for who I am? You're entitled to enjoy the results of your actions. She's still just as awful years later. Next time she speaks up, I'd ask where she works now and pull out my phone. Also, if your aunt is married, her husband might want to check her phone. Cheaters stick up for cheaters. You didn't ruin their reputations, you set the record straight. You were a kid back then. Now she's the one acting childish. Tell her to move on and your aunt to stay out of it. If anyone owes an apology, it's your dad and his wife to you and your mom. Cheating doesn't just betray a spouse, it betrays the kids too. Kids lose the most. Their betrayal turned your life upside down. They should be apologizing for that. I've been married to my husband for 8 years, and during that time, I've never spent a holiday with my family because his family always comes first. It's not about culture, it's about boundaries. His family guilt trips him whenever he tries to skip their holiday gatherings, and he hasn't found the courage to stand firm. Once, he did push back and said he wouldn't go, but his mom invited herself to my mom's for Thanksgiving. We had to leave early because my mom can't stand her, and instead of seeing it for what it was, my husband felt guilty and left with his mom so she wouldn't be alone on the holiday. Yes, I know I have a husband issue. We've discussed it multiple times, and he admits it's a problem, but says he doesn't know how to handle the guilt. He has deep abandonment issues because his mom gave him up to the state when he was 6, and he was in foster care until his older sister took custody a few years later. Last year, I refused to do anything for Thanksgiving because I wouldn't go to his family's, and my mom wasn't hosting. My husband stayed home with me, but his mom showed up uninvited at 8 p.m. with food for herself and him. Then, on Christmas, I cooked dinner for my husband, myself, and my kids, his stepkids, who spent Thanksgiving with their dad. His mom showed up unannounced, served herself before the kids ate, and took 3 plates of food home for her boyfriend before anyone else got any. I didn't eat, and we only realized after she left while we were sledding with the kids. She did the same at my son's birthday in April, sneaking off with half the pizzas I'd bought. So this year, we bought a house, and I'm hosting Thanksgiving, but I told my husband his mom isn't welcome. She has no respect, and I want to enjoy the food I cook without her taking it before anyone else gets a chance. He suggested she could bring a dish to make up for it. I said a side dish doesn't fix her stealing our food. She's well off, so it's not about need, she just hates cooking, and her boyfriend is a lazy drunk who expects to be served. I told my husband this Thanksgiving is for my parents, not his family. None of them are welcome. I have my kids this year, and I want a day with just my family. If he wants to see his family, he can go alone, but they're not welcome here. He says I'm making him feel pushed out of his own home and that he can't stop his mom from showing up. I disagree and said she'll be turned away if she comes. He called me cold and said I don't care about his feelings or how this makes him look. Am I wrong? Response: you're not wrong. The real issue is your husband, not his mom. He needs to grow a backbone. I wouldn't tolerate it. He needs to cut the cord. If he wants to deal with her nonsense, he can leave his family and go eat with the woman who abandoned him to the state. Your mother-in-law is a piece of work, but you don't have to let her in or deal with her. Keep setting boundaries and being the bad guy. His mom will never give him the love he craves. The perfect family he imagines doesn't exist, and she takes advantage of him, but he's too desperate for her approval to stop her. He needs a wake-up call. If this continues, you might end up resenting him enough to walk away. Love alone can't hold a marriage together. I, a 34-year-old man, spent a couple of months in India this year for a work project with my engineering company. Before I left, my sister-in-law, 29, who's from India, asked me to take lots of photos during my trip. She was excited for me to see her home country and curious about how things might have changed in the state she grew up in, as she hasn't been back in years. She didn't say what kind of photos she wanted. Since the project was long, I had weekends and holidays to explore. I visited some famous landmarks with colleagues, but I wasn't that impressed compared to places like Rome or Paris, so I only took a few pictures. As an engineer, I was more drawn to observing how people live, especially housing, infrastructure, and sanitation in less affluent areas. I've done this in places like Egypt and Somalia too. It helps me appreciate what I have. So most of my photos were of slums, polluted rivers, people washing clothes or bathing in dirty water, and everyday life in poorer regions. India fascinated me because my country has seen a lot of immigration from there recently, and I wanted to better understand their culture and background. Am I wrong for not taking more photos for my sister-in-law? Response: you're wrong. If you moved abroad and heard your in-law was visiting your homeland, asked for photos to ease your homesickness, would you be thrilled if they only sent pictures of poverty and trash? It's such a small gesture that would have meant a lot to her. It's a shame you didn't consider that. As an engineer, sure, you're curious about infrastructure. But you knew she didn't grow up in a slum, so those images weren't what she was nostalgic for. They also don't give you real insight into the culture of immigrants in your country. What a misguided idea. You're one of those people who think authenticity in Asian or African countries means poverty. I've met these types so many times, it's exhausting. I met a Canadian couple in the Andamans in 2017 when the main island was clean. The water was crystal clear with beautiful white sand beaches. They were upset, saying it wasn't real India and they didn't want touristy spots. It's not even that touristy. They loved Mumbai, clearly because they went on one of those tours that show Westerners slums like it's a zoo. You're wrong and your attitude is